What if I told you that everything you were taught about God, about heaven, about salvation was only the surface of something far deeper? What if the institutions that claim to bring you closer to the divine were actually keeping you from it? Imagine someone walking into a sacred temple, thinking they're unlocking the deepest mysteries, only to find out the real door is hidden beneath the floorboards, sealed off, and guarded by silence. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a spiritual emergency. Because the truth I'm going to speak to you now is not safe for the masses. It's for chosen ones, only those who have suffered, those who have questioned, those who are ready to see past the veil. We were told to obey, not to explore. We were told to believe, not to remember. But there's a reason why your soul is never fully fit into the box of religious teachings. There's a reason why the scriptures inspired you but never fully answered your deepest questions. Because the truth was never designed to be handed to you. It was designed to be discovered within you. And the systems built around religion knew that if you ever found it, they would lose their power. That's the truth religion tries to hide from you. The real divine presence is not locked in a book. It's not chained to a pulpit. It doesn't live in fear-based sermons. It lives in your breath, in the stillness behind your thoughts, in the sacred intelligence of your cells. But if they taught you that, how would they control you? How would they monetize your guilt? How would they sell you the idea that you need a middleman to access what's already inside you? The chosen ones are the ones who were born with an inner rebellion, not because they are disobedient, but because they remember. You remember that you came from something holy, and no man in a robe can define it for you.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
When you were a child, you may have felt it, a sense of something more, something vast and silent and alive. But then they told you what to call it, what it wants, what it hates. They gave it a gender, a voice, a personality, and they told you to fear it. But how can we fear the source of all love? How can we be told we're born in sin when we were clearly born in mystery? The lie is subtle, but it's deep. It's not that religion is all false, it's that it's incomplete. It offers the map but tells you never to leave the church to explore the terrain. The truth is, you were never meant to follow blindly. You were meant to awaken. And that awakening is dangerous to systems that thrive on dependency. When you awaken, you stop needing permission. You stop needing a savior. You realize you are the temple. You are the altar. You are the sacred ground. And that's when they start calling you rebellious, or worse, heretical. But what if heresy is simply remembering something too real to be controlled? Let's go deeper. Why do you think every spiritual master who taught direct connection to the divine was either exiled, crucified, or silenced? Why do you think mystics were burned, prophets were hunted, and visionaries were erased? Because they threatened the structure. They taught that God was not something to be worshipped from afar, but something to be realized within. And that kind of truth doesn't build empires. It builds awakened souls. And awakened souls don't bow. You don't need to reject religion to see this. You just need to go beyond it. Religion can be a gateway, but it should never be a cage. A true teacher points you back to yourself, not to their authority. A real path helps you remember, not just recite. So ask yourself now, What teachings have you accepted without questioning? What beliefs do you hold that were never truly yours? Can you dare to let go of what you were told so you can finally hear what your soul has been whispering all along? The truth religion tries to hide is that you don't need saving. You need remembering. You need reconnection. You need to touch the divine not through doctrine, but through direct experience. And that experience doesn't require a priest, a building, or a rule book. It requires stillness, sincerity, surrender. And that's why the chosen ones often go through suffering, because suffering strips away the noise. It breaks the illusion. It brings you to the edge, where the only thing left is the truth. And here's where most people turn back. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Once you feel the divine inside you not as a belief, but as a frequency, you can't go back to kneeling out of fear. You begin to walk with presence. You begin to speak with authority, not the authority given by religion, but the authority born from alignment. And when you live like that, you threaten everything built on blind obedience. But you also become a beacon, a mirror, a reminder. You become the living proof that the sacred is not distant, it's right here, in your heartbeat, in your breath, in the space between your thoughts. And people will feel it. They won't know why they're drawn to you, but they will be. Because your energy carries the memory of something they forgot. That's your power. That's your mission. That's why you were chosen. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means you stop outsourcing your spiritual authority. You stop obsessing over being good enough to be loved by God. You stop thinking heaven is a place you earn and start realizing it's a state of consciousness you embody. You stop fearing karma and start aligning with truth. You begin to ask better questions, not what does this religion say, but what feels true in my soul, because your soul has always known. This path is not easy. It's lonely. It's confusing. It's disorienting. But it is real. And in a world full of spiritual performance, real is rare. Real is holy. Real is what the divine responds to. And once you start living from this place, your life becomes a living prayer. Not the kind you recite, the kind you breathe. The kind that changes people just by being in your presence. And yes, people will judge you. They'll call you lost. They'll say you're deceived. But what they don't see is that you're not lost, you're just beyond the map. You're not deceived, you're just not distracted. You're not rebellious, you're remembering. And that memory is sacred. That memory is dangerous. That memory is the truth religion tries to hide. So now I ask you, chosen one, what would your life look like if you stopped fearing divine punishment and started living from divine power? Who would you be without the guilt, the shame, the fear that was never yours to carry? What would it feel like to speak to the divine directly, without an interpreter? Once you've heard the truth with your soul, not just your ears, something changes forever. You can no longer sit in a pew and pretend the sermon is enough. You can no longer chant the words without feeling the energy behind them. You can no longer go through the motions of belief when your inner knowing is screaming that something deeper is calling you. And that calling isn't external. It's not an angel appearing in the sky or a booming voice from heaven. It's quiet. It's a pull in your chest, It's a memory returning from your future. You've been here before, where everything you were taught starts to unravel, and what rises in its place is terrifyingly beautiful: your direct connection to the divine. The truth religion hides from you is that the divine doesn't need to be worshipped, it wants to be experienced. And more than that, it wants to be co-created with. You were never meant to be a servant in the kingdom, you were meant to be a creator in the cosmos. That's the secret that flips the entire script. You're not here to earn worthiness. You're here to remember you already are worthy. You're not here to beg for mercy. You're here to awaken to the truth that the divine has never once judged you. That guilt you carry, it's not yours. It was given to you by people who were also given it, generation after generation, until shame became spiritual currency. But chosen ones, we're here to break that cycle. We're not here to tear down religion, we're here to transmute it, and to extract the essence and discard the distortion, to keep the sacred and release the control. Because every religion started with someone who had a direct experience of the divine, a mystic, a prophet, a soul brave enough to speak what they saw without needing approval. But over time, their words were turned into rules. Their visions were turned into systems. Their freedom was turned into fear. And the people who came after stopped seeking experiences, they started memorizing doctrines. So here's your moment of reckoning. Will you keep living in the shadows of someone else's revelation, or will you have your own? Will you repeat the words, or will you ignite the frequency behind them? Will you stay safe inside the temple, or will you walk into the wilderness where the divine is still wild, still untamed, still waiting to meet you with fire in its eyes? You see, the divine is not fragile. It doesn't need protection. It's not offended by your questions. In fact, it's in your deepest questions that you find your most sacred answers. That's why religious systems often discourage doubt, because doubt leads to inquiry, and inquiry leads to experience, and experience leads to sovereignty, and sovereignty cannot be controlled. But chosen ones were never meant to be controlled. We were meant to walk directly with the sacred, unfiltered, unafraid, unapologetic. And when you begin to do that, when you stop performing and start embodying, you start to see how much of your life was shaped by fear disguised as faith. You start to feel how many of your choices were made from a place of what will God think, instead of what does my soul know. That shift changes everything. Because when you stop fearing divine punishment, you start living from divine alignment. You stop trying to be good and start being true. And when you're true, your energy becomes undeniable. Your presence becomes a portal. That's why you've always felt different. That's why you couldn't fully belong. Because you weren't meant to blend in, you were meant to be a wake-up call. And the truth is, you've been chosen not because you're better, but because you were willing to break. You were willing to question. You were willing to lose everything just to find what's real. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you dangerous to the system and holy to the divine. Now let's talk about real spiritual power, not the kind that comes from titles or robes or rituals, but the kind that comes from direct connection. When you realize that the divine lives in your breath, your body becomes a temple. When you realize that your thoughts shape reality, your mind becomes a sacred tool. When you realize that love is not just an emotion but a frequency, your heart becomes a transmitter. You don't need to be saved, you need to be activated. And that activation comes not from obeying, but from remembering. And here's where the practical part kicks in. Because this truth isn't meant to just live in your mind. It's meant to shape how you live, how you love, how you serve. You stop chasing external validation. You stop waiting for someone to tell you you're worthy. You stop giving your power to people who claim to have a closer relationship with God than you. And you start walking like you know who you are. Like you know what you carry. Like you know that the sacred is not just above you, it's within you. This doesn't mean you become arrogant. It means you become aligned. And alignment is humility in motion. Because when you're truly connected to the divine, you don't need to prove it. You don't need to post about it. You carry it in the way you breathe, the way you speak, the way you show up. And people feel it. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. Because truth has a vibration, and you now carry that vibration. So let's ask the deeper question: if religion built its foundation on fear, then what would your life look like if it were built on love instead? What would shift in your relationships, in your choices, in your sense of purpose? What would you stop doing? What would you start becoming? Because that's the entire point. You're not here to believe in something, you're here to become something. You're here to embody the divine in a way that no one else can. And that embodiment doesn't require permission. It only requires presence. It only requires that you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of the crowd. And yes, people will say you're lost. But what they don't know is that you've only left the map because you found the compass. That compass doesn't speak in commandments. It speaks in resonance. It doesn't tell you what to do, it shows you what aligns. That's the new way. That's the real way. That's the ancient way that existed before religion ever had a name. So when the old beliefs rise again, when the fear returns, when the guilt whispers, when the shame creeps in, remember this: you are not falling, you are shedding. You are not backsliding, you are recalibrating. You are not betraying the divine, you are finally meeting it. And when you meet it, not in a book, not in a building, but in yourself, you'll understand why they tried to keep this truth hidden. Because a soul that knows itself is a soul that cannot be controlled. A soul that walks with the divine is a soul that lights fires wherever it goes. And you, chosen one, were born to set the world ablaze, not with destruction, but with awakening. So I leave you with this: what if the very thing you've been taught to fear is the only thing that can set you free? And what if your freedom is the exact thing the world has been waiting for? Now that you've walked through the fire of unlearning, felt the ground disappear beneath your inherited beliefs, and tasted the raw truth pulsing beneath the words God, faith, and salvation, you can never return to sleep. The illusion has been pierced. The veil has been lifted. And what lies beyond isn't chaos, it's clarity. You've seen now that the divine was never meant to be caged in rituals or confined to stained glass symbols. You've realized that the infinite cannot be owned, cannot be sold, cannot be brokered through a system built to keep you needing what you already are. And that realization is the most dangerous truth of all, because it makes you sovereign. It makes you free. Freedom is the one thing religion cannot offer without losing its grip. Because freedom means you don't need to be told what to think, how to pray, or who to follow. Freedom means your relationship with the divine becomes so intimate so alive that no one else can interpret it for you. And that's what institutions fear: not your sin, but your sovereignty. Not your rebellion, but your inner authority. Because a sovereign soul is unpredictable. A sovereign soul can't be manipulated with doctrine, guilt, or fear. A sovereign soul doesn't just believe in God, it becomes a living expression of it. But let's be clear, this path isn't about arrogance. It's about alignment. It's not about claiming to be above others. It's about finally coming home to your center. The center you were born with. The center that was never broken, never lost, only buried beneath layers of conditioning. Religion told you to repent. The divine whispers, remember. Religion told you to kneel. The divine urges you, rise. Religion told you to fear judgment. The divine says, you were never judged, only misunderstood. And now that you've remembered, your life cannot look the same. Because the truth is not just something you know, it's something that reconfigures your entire being. It changes how you speak, how you listen, how you love. You no longer look at others and see sinners, you see fragments of the infinite, each on their own sacred path. You no longer see yourself as broken, you see yourself as becoming. And that becoming is messy. It doesn't fit into neat rows or polished prayers. It isn't always pretty, but it is always real. This is why the chosen ones often walk alone. Not because we are better, but because we are being refined. We are being stripped of the false so the soul can finally breathe. And in that solitude, a new kind of communion is born. A communion not of bread and wine, but of breath and presence. A sacredness that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. You feel it when you stare at the stars and something ancient stirs in your chest. You feel it when you sit in silence and realize the voice you were seeking outside was always your own soul speaking in stillness. But even now, even after awakening, you must stay vigilant, because the system will try to pull you back in. It will offer you comfort in exchange for conformity. It will tempt you with belonging, with identity, with certainty, so long as you agree to stay small. But you didn't come here to stay small. You came here to expand. You came here to anchor a new frequency on this planet. A frequency that doesn't just talk about God, it lives as God in motion. And that's the truth they don't teach in Sunday school. The truth is that you are not separate from the divine, you are its extension. The spark in your chest is not metaphorical. It's literal. You are the breath of the infinite wrapped in human form. And every time you doubt yourself, every time you shrink for the comfort of others, you dim the light that was never yours to withhold. The world doesn't need more obedience. It needs more embodiment. And the chosen ones are the ones who agreed to embody what others only preach. So how do you live this truth? You start by listening, not to the noise, but to the knowing. You start by honoring your own alignment more than external approval. You start by making every moment sacred, not because a book told you to, but because your soul won't let you live any other way. You start by forgiving yourself for ever believing you were unworthy of what you've always been, divine. And when the old guilt rises, when the fear creeps in, when the voice of the past whispers, "Who do you think you are?" you answer not with defense, but with presence. You say, "I am," not "I am this" or "I am that." but simply I am. Because that's the name of God, the breath of existence, the truth beneath all truths. I am is not just a statement, it's a remembrance. It's the vibration of creation speaking through you. This is the revolution, not of violence, but of vibration, not of protest, but of presence. It's the quiet yet thunderous shift that happens when a soul decides to stop living in fear and starts living in truth. And every time a chosen one makes that shift, the world changes. Realities bend, timelines realign. You don't need to change the system. You need to transcend it. You don't need to convert others. You need to embody a frequency that makes them remember what they are. You are not a follower. You are not a student. You are not a sinner waiting for redemption. You are a divine being rediscovering your voice, your vision, your vibration. And your awakening is not a threat to the sacred. It is the sacred. You are not here to destroy religion. You are here to fulfill what religion forgot, to bring the truth back to the center, where it always belonged. So now here is the final question, one that no doctrine can answer for you, one that only your soul can speak truth to. What do you know in your bones that no one ever taught you? What sacred truth lives in your silence, in your stillness, in your suffering? And are you willing to live it, even if no one claps, even if everyone walks away, even if the world calls you crazy? Because that's the price of awakening. But it's also the prize. You came here not to be accepted, but to be authentic. You came here not to follow, but to remember. You came here not to fit into the story, you came here to rewrite it. And now you know the truth.